Hello, greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of green across this vast, marvelous multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horace, and welcome back, my dear, marvelous, wonderful scholars, to the study. Hello there, Dr. Zadium. Welcome. Hello there, Yulin20. Heidi ho to you as well, and congratulations on getting first. Hello there, and congratulations on that seventh stream streak. Wow, that is quite a nice number. Oh my goodness, I'm out of breath. Dr. Zadium, good to be here. Good to have you here. Need to hydrate right away. Oh, it's been a day. It's been a day. A busy day here at the study. Horace and I working as hard as we can. How are all you fine, wonderful, marvelous scholars wherever you are? Wherever you are, whenever you are. ah, well, Julian20, I am marvelous. Good, glad to hear it, glad to hear it. Um, so Dr. Zay, I'm doing well, enjoying a hopefully relaxing evening. I hope it's relaxing as well. I can tell you that. Um, so if you're wondering what happened to the VOD for for Tuesday's stream, um, well, here's the thing about that stream. Um, Apparently I didn't do my research well enough. We watched a movie, a certain film, which I thought was in the public domain, and apparently it was. But recently, the copyright on said film got renewed. So that's something I didn't know about. So unfortunately, I had to remove the entire stream. Oh, all that hard work. Oh, but it was for safety reasons. You have to be careful with copyright laws because they change on a dime. 1 minute something can be in the public domain and available to everyone. The next, nope, it's copyrighted. So unfortunately, that movie stream is unavailable now. Although I do promise I will make it up to you with another movie stream at some point. I do have a movie picked out, which we can watch and not worry about copyright, thankfully. But I digress. Oh, before I forget, we should welcome a new scholar to our midst. Brother Daigon, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. I am Matsu Quinox, interdimensional omniversal librarian, stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes on other days. I'm glad to have all you marvelous, wonderful scholars here. You make my existence so worth it. Even in this exile inside this pocket universe, having you scholars just brings a wonderful feeling to me. Wonderful. I probably sound so strange right now. Yulian20, cause we love you, Matsu. Ah, thank you. Making me blush. Anyway, tonight we are doing another reading stream. We are continuing our reading of Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Last time, our hero, well, the supposed hero, David, has found himself accused of murder after the Red Fox Campbell, I believe his name was the Red Fox Campbell, was shot in front of him and he's been accused of it. He's on the run once more with his friend Alan, who he finally met up with. And now they are going to be seeking shelter, I think, elsewhere. And it is just a mess. And honestly, David is just, yeah. Yulian20, that guy just doesn't learn, does he? He does not! David does not! He's that perfect combination of naivete, idealism, and a certain amount. I'm trying to think of the word. He has such a a high opinion of himself and how he sees the world that it really is so irritating because the book very often proves him completely wrong in his actions, which is kind of funny in a way. Any number of time he could have solved these issues, but because he keeps making assumptions and leaping at the first idea he has, he's always in such rotten luck. So then, my dear scholars, shall we begin our reading back into the adventure of Kidnapped? Why I pose that as a question, I don't know. Right then, I have everyone ready. So sit back, my dear scholars. Sit back, relax, have a hot or cold beverage of your liking. Dim the lights if you wish. And let us continue our reading of Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. And pardon the cough, of course, the dear cosmic allergens are up, so I may be a little bit of sneeze, a little bit of a cough. You're used to it by now, I think. Chapter 20. The Flight in the Heather. The Rocks. Sometimes we walked, sometimes ran, and as it drew on to morning, walked ever the less and ran the more. Though upon its face that country appeared to be a desert, yet there were huts and houses of the people, of which we must have passed more than 20, hidden in quiet places of the hills. When we came to one of these, Allan would leave me in the way, and go himself and rap upon the side of the house, and speak a while at the window with some sleeper awakened. This was to pass the news, which in that country was so much of a duty that Allan must pause to attend to it even while fleeing for his life, and so well attended to by others that in no more than half the houses where we called they had heard already of the murder. In the others, as well as I could make out, standing back at a distance and hearing a strange tongue, the news was received with more consternation than surprise. For all our hurry, day began to come in while we were still far from any shelter. It found us in a prodigious valley strewn with rocks, and where ran a foaming river. Wild mountains stood around it. There grew there neither grass nor trees, and I have sometimes thought since then that it may have been the valley called Glencoe, where the massacre was in the time of King William. But for the details of our itinerary, I am all to seek. Our way lying now by short cuts, now by great detours, our pace being so hurried, our time of journeying usually by night, and the names of such places as I asked and heard being in the Gaelic tongue and the more easily forgotten. The first peep of morning then showed us this horrible place, and I could see Allan knit his brow. "This is no fit place for you and me," he said. "This is a place they're bound to watch." And with that he ran harder than ever down to the waterside, in a part where the river was split in two among 3 rocks. It went through with a horrid thundering that made my belly quake, and there hung over the Lynn a little mist of spray. Allan looked neither to the right nor to the left, but jumped clean upon the middle rock, and fell there on his hands and knees to check himself, for that rock was small, and he might have pitched over on the far side. I had scarce time to measure the distance or to understand the peril before I had followed him, and he had caught and stopped me. So there we stood, side by side, upon a small rock, slippery with spray, a far broader leap in front of us, and the river dinning upon all sides. When I saw where I was, there came on me a deadly sickness of fear, and I put my hand over my eyes. Allan took me and shook me. I saw he was speaking, but the roaring of the falls and the trouble of my mind prevented me from hearing. Only I saw his face was red with anger, and that he stamped upon the rock. The same look showed me the water raging by, and the mist hanging in the air, And with that, I covered my eyes again and shuddered. Excuse me. The next minute, Alan had set the brandy bottle to my lips and forced me to drink about a gill, which sent the blood into my head again. Then, putting his hands to his mouth and his mouth to my ear, he shouted, "Hey, no drown!" and turned his back upon me, leaped over the farther branch of the stream, and landed safe. I was now alone upon the rock, which gave me the more room. The brandy was singing in my ears. I had this good example fresh before me, and just wit enough to see that if I did not leap at once, I should never leap at all. I bent low on my knees and flung myself forth, with that kind of anger of despair that has sometimes stood me instead of courage. Sure enough, it was but my hands that reached the full length. These slipped, caught again, slipped again, and I was sliding back into the linn when Alan seized me, first by the hair, ow, then by the collar, and with a great strain dragged me into safety. Never a word he said, but set off running again for his life, and I must stagger to my feet and run after him. I had been weary before, but now I was sick and bruised, and partially drunken with the brandy. Sorry. I kept stumbling as I ran. I had a stitch that came near to overmaster me. And when at last Alan paused under a great rock that stood there among a number of others, it was none too soon for David Balfour. A great rock I have said, but by rights it was two rocks leaning together at the top, both some 20 feet high, and at the first sight inaccessible. Even Alan, though you may say he had as good as 4 hands, failed twice in an attempt to climb them, and it was only at the third trial, and then by standing on my shoulders and leaping up with such force as I thought must have broken my collarbone, that he secured a lodgment. Once there, he let down his leathern girdle, and with the aid of that and a pair of shallow footholds in the rock, I scrambled up beside him. Then I saw why he had come there, for the two rocks being both somewhat hollow on the top and sloping one to the other, made a kind of dish or saucer, where as many as 3 or 4 men might have laid hidden. All this while Alan had not said a word, and had run and climbed with such a savage, silent frenzy of hurry that I knew that he was in mortal fear of some miscarriage. Even now we were on the rock, he said nothing, nor so much as relaxed the frowning look upon his face, but clapped flat down, and keeping only one eye above the edge of our place of shelter, scouted all around the compass. The dawn had come quite clear. We could see the stony sides of the valley and its bottom, which was bestrewn with rocks, and the river which went from one side to another and made white falls. But nowhere the smoke of a house, nor any living creature, but some eagles screaming round a cliff. Then at last Alan smiled. "Aye," said he, "now do we have a chance." And then looking at me with some amusement, "You're no very glig at the jumping," said he. Glig meaning brisk, as according to these language notes. At this I suppose I colored with mortification, for he added at once, "Hoots, small blame to ye. To be feared of a thing and yet to do it is what makes the prettiest kind of a man. And then there was water there, and water's a thing that dauntens even me." "No, no," said Alan, "it's no you that's to blame, it's me." I asked him why. "Why?" said he. "I have proved myself a gormiro this night. For first of all I take a wrong road, and then in my own country of Appin, so that the day has caught us where we should never have been. and thanks to that we lie here in some danger and mere discomfort. And next, which is the worst of the two for a man that has been so much among the hither as myself, I have come wanting a water bottle, and here we lie for a long summer's day with nothing but neat spirit. Ye may think a small matter, but before it comes night, David, ye'll give me news of it. I was anxious to redeem my character, and offered, if he would pour out the brandy, to run down and fill the bottle at the river. I would nae waste the good spirit either, says he. It's been a good friend to you this night, or in my poor opinion, ye would still be cocking on yon stone. And what's mair, says he, ye may have observed, you that's a man of so much penetration, that Aaron Brock Stewart was perhaps walking quicker than his owner. You? I cried. You're a running fit to burst. Was I so? Said he. What's the... Dr. Sadium, what's with the face? What's with the face, Dr. Sadium? What? What is it? What did I do? Dr. Zadium, just some of his word choice. Yeah, yes, I know. It was a different time. It was a different culture. Yes, the word choices are, yes, interesting to say the least. Okay, here it is. Was I so? Said he. Well then, ye may depend upon it. There was nae time to be lost. And now here's enough said. Gain ye to your sleep, lad, and I'll watch. Accordingly, I lay down to sleep. A little peaty earth had drifted in between the top of the two rocks, and some bracken grew there to be a bed to me. The last thing I heard was still the crying of the eagles. I dare say it would be 9 in the morning when I was roughly awakened and found Alan's hand pressed upon my mouth. "Wish it," he whispered. "Ye was snoring." "Well," said I, surprised at his anxious and dark face. "And why not?" He peered over the edge of the rock and signed me to do the like. Excuse me. It was now high day, cloudless, and very hot. The valley was as clear as in a picture. About half a mile up the water was a camp of redcoats. A big fire blazed in their midst, at which some were cooking, and nearby, on the top of a rock about as high as ours, there stood a sentry, with the sun sparkling on his arms. All the way down along the riverside were posted other sentries, here near together, there widely scattered, some planted like the first on places of command, some on the ground level, and marching and counter-marching so as to meet halfway. Higher up the glen, where the ground was more open, the chain of posts was continued by horse soldiers, whom we could see in the distance riding to and fro. Lower down, the infantry continued, but as the stream suddenly swelled by the confluence of a considerable burn, they were more widely set, and only watched the fords and stepping stones. Oh, this is a longer chapter. Excuse me. I took but one look at them and ducked again into my place. It was strange indeed to see this valley, which had lain so solitary in the hour of dawn, bristling with arms and dotted with the redcoats and breeches. "You see," said Alan. Oh, this was what I was afraid of, Davy, that they would watch the burnside. They began to come in about 2 hours ago, and man, but ye're a grand hand at the sleeping. We're in a narrow place. If they get up the sides of the hill, they could easily spy us with the glass. But if they'll only keep in the foot of the valley, we'll do yet. The posts are thinner down the water, and come night, we'll try our hand at getting by them. And what are we to do till night? I asked. Lie here, says he, and bristle. That one good Scotch word, bristle, was indeed the most of the story of the day that we had now to pass. You are to remember that we lay on the bare top of a rock like scones upon a griddle. The sun beat upon us cruelly. The rock grew so heated a man could scarce endure the touch of it, and the little patch of earth and fern which kept cooler was only large enough for one at a time. We took turns about to lie on the naked rock, which was indeed like the position of that saint that was martyred on a gridiron. Wonder which one that was. And it ran in my mind how strange it was that in the same climate and at only a few days' distance, it should have suffered so cruelly. I should have suffered so cruelly, first from cold upon my island, and now from heat upon this rock. All the while we had no water, only raw brandy for a drink, which was worse than nothing. But we kept the bottle as cool as we could, burying it in the earth, and got some relief by bathing our breasts and temples. FT Waste, St. Lawrence apparently. Oh, interesting! And hello there, FT Waste. Welcome! We are reading the first chapter of our reading of Kidnap tonight. That is interesting. Thank you for the information there, Wastes. The soldiers kept stirring all day in the bottom of the valley, now changing guard, now in patrolling parties hunting among the rocks. These lay round in so great a number that to look for men among them was like looking for a needle in a bottle of hay. So is that close enough to a needle in a haystack then? Which sent a... Oh. And being so hopeless a task, it was gone about with less care. Yet we could see the soldiers pike their bayonets among the heather, which sent a cold thrill through my vitals, and they would sometimes hang about our rock, so that we scarce dared to breathe. It was in this way that I first heard the right English speech. One fellow as he went by actually clapping his hand upon the sunny face of the rock on which we lay, and plucking it off again with an oath. I tell ye it's ought. I'm trying to get this accent right. I tell you it's ought, says he, and I was amazed at the clipping tones and the odd sing-song in which he spoke, and no less at that strange trick of dropping out the H, the letter H. To be sure I had heard Ransom, but he had taken his ways from all sorts of people and spoke so imperfectly at the best that I set down the most of it to childishness. My surprise was all the greater to hear that manner of speaking in the mouth of a grown man. And indeed I have never grown used to it, nor yet altogether with the English grammar, and perhaps a very critical eye might here and there spy out even in these memoirs. That seems like such an odd thing to talk about. I mean, they're in mortal danger, and now he's talking about English grammar language. Huh. The tediousness and pain of these hours upon the rock grew only the greater as the day went on, the rock getting still the hotter, and the sun fiercer. There were giddiness and sickness and sharp pains like rheumatism to be supported. I minded them, and have often minded since, on the lines in our Scotch psalm. The moon by night thee shall not smite, nor yet the sun by day. And indeed it was only by God's blessing that we neither of us were sun-smitten. I see. I see we have one of those visitors. I can't exactly get rid of them. Unfortunately, I don't have a mod. Let us ignore. At last, about 2, it was beyond men's bearing, and there was now temptation to resist as well as pain to thaw. For the sun being now got a little into the west, there came a patch of shade on the east side of our rock, which was the side sheltered from the soldiers. "As well one death as another," said Allen. "Ft. Waste, grant me the power, allow me to smite them, librarian." "Well, I do need a mod. Um, if I can figure out. I do need a mod. Huh. I have no idea how to add. I have no idea how to make a mod either. I might have to do this later. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to make mods, unfortunately. Unless it's something yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know how to do it. Da, da, da. Yeah, I don't know how to do it, unfortunately. Sorry, it wastes. Forward slash should give you some options in chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, hold on. Oh, wait. Congratulations, FT Waste. You are my first mod. Now, please, please, please. Thank you. Thank you, Wastes. And also, again, congratulations. We have our first mod, my dear scholars. Yay. Julian20, and he will be brilliant. I concur on that fact. Oh, hello there, Firefly. Welcome. Welcome. We are reading. Just don't let the power go to your head, Wastes. Okay? Otherwise, Horus will have a talk with you. Two ways power, the absolute. Waste, don't! Waste, do not! You will anger Horus. Okay, where was I? "As well as one death as another," said Allen, and slipped over the edge and dropped on the ground on the shadowy side. I followed him at once and instantly fell all my length, so weak was I, and so giddy with that long exposure. Here then we lay for an hour or two, aching from head to foot, as weak as water, and lying quite naked to the eye of any soldier. Oh my! Lying quite naked to the eye of any soldier who should have strolled that way. None came, however, all passing by on the other side, so that our rock continued to be our shield even in this new position. Presently we began again to get a little strength, and as the soldiers were now lying close along the riverside, Allen proposed that we should try a start. I was at this time afraid of but one thing in the world, and that was to be set back upon the rock. Anything else was welcome to me. So we got ourselves at once in marching order, and began to slip from rock to rock, one after the other, now crawling flat on our bellies in the shade, now making a run for it, heart in mouth. The soldiers, having searched this side of the valley after a fashion, and being perhaps somewhat sleepy with the sultriness of the afternoon, had now laid by much of their vigilance, and had stood dozing at their posts, or only kept a lookout along the banks of the river. So that in this way, keeping down the valley and at the same time towards the mountains, we drew steadily away from their neighborhood. But the business was the most wearing I had ever taken part in. A man had need of 100 eyes in every part of him to keep concealed in that uneven country, and within cry of so many and scattered sentries. Excuse me. When we must pass an open place, quickness was not all, but a swift judgment not only of the lie of the whole country, but of the solidarity of every stone on which we must set foot. For the afternoon was now fallen so breathless that the rolling of a pebble sounded abroad like a pistol shot, and would start the echo, calling among the hills and cliffs. By sundown we had made some distance, even by our slow rate of progress, though, to be sure, the sentry on the rock was still plainly in our view. But now we came on something that put all fears out of season, and that was a deep, rushing burn that tore down in that part to join the Glen River. At the sight of this, we cast ourselves on the ground and plunged head and shoulders in the water, and I cannot tell which was the more pleasant, the great shock as the cool spring went over us, or the greed with which we drank of it. Oh, well, no, I was gonna say hopefully that water's clean, but of course it's not clean. I don't even know how they would stand that back then. We lay there, for the banks hit us, drank again and again, bathed our chests, let our wrists trail in the running water till they ached with the chill, and at last, being wonderfully renewed, we got out the meal bag and made drammach in the iron pan. This, though it is but cold water mingled with oatmeal, yet makes a good enough dish for the hungry man, and where there are no means of making fire, or as in our case, good reason for not making one, it is the chief standby of those who have taken to the heather. As soon as the shadow of the night had fallen, we set forth again, at first with the same caution, but presently with more boldness, standing our full height and stepping out at a good pace of walking. The way was very intricate, lying up the steep sides of mountains and along the brows of cliffs. Clouds had come in with the sunset, and the night was dark and cool, so that I walked without much fatigue, but in continual fear of falling and rolling down the mountains, and with no guess at our direction. The moon rose at last, and found us still on the road. It was in its last quarter, and was long beset with clouds, but after a while shone out and showed me many dark heads of mountains, and was reflected far underneath us on the narrow arm of a sea loch. At this sight we both paused. I, struck with wonder to find myself so high, and walking, as it seemed to me, upon clouds. Allen, to make sure of his direction. Seemingly he was well pleased, and he must certainly have judged us out of earshot of all our enemies, for throughout the rest of our night march he beguiled the way with whistling of many tunes, warlike, merry, plaintive, real tunes, that made the foot go faster, tunes of my own south country that made me fain to be home from my adventures, and all these on the great, dark, desert mountains, making company upon the way. Wow, for once David didn't screw something up. Oh my goodness. That's a minor miracle in itself. Let's be honest. Oh. Still, it seems like they're doing something right. Oh, thank you for the hydrate wastes. And thank you for the posture check. I'm drinking some lemonade tonight for the reading. Oh, it is so dry here in the study right now. Oh, but yes, I don't have much to say about that chapter. I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, they're on the run, and again, David for once didn't screw anything up. So let us continue then, and see if anything goes wrong, like it inevitably will. Chapter 21: The Flight in the Heather. The Hue of Corinekeg. Early as day comes in the beginning of July. It was still dark when we reached our destination. Oh, I read that wrong. Early as day comes in the beginning of July, it was still dark when we reached our destination, a cleft in the head of a great mountain, with a water running through the midst, and upon the one hand a shallow cave in a rock. Birches grew there in a thin, pretty wood, which a little farther on was changed into a wood of pines. The burn was full of trout, the wood of cashat doves. On the open side of the mountain beyond, wallops would always be whistling, and cuckoos were plentiful. I'm guessing these are all birds, most of them, other than the trout. From the mouth of the cleft we looked down upon a part of Mamor, and on the sea loch that divides the country from Appin, and this from so great a height as made it my continual wonder and pleasure to sit and behold them. The name of the cleft was the Hue of Corinnagan, and although from its height I'm probably mispronouncing that awful, and although from its height and being so near upon the sea it was often beset with clouds, yet it was on the whole a pleasant place, and the 5 days we lived in it went happily. We slept in the cave, making our bed of heather bushes. We slept in the cave, making our bed of heather bushes, which we cut for that purpose, and covering ourselves with Allan's greatcoat. There was a low concealed place, in a turning of the glen, where we were so bold as to make fire, so that we could warm ourselves when the clouds set in, and cook hot porridge, and grill the little trouts that we caught with our hands under the stones, and overhanging banks of the burn. This was indeed our chief pleasure and business, and not only to save our meal against worse times, but with a rivalry that much amused us, we spent a great part of our days at the waterside, stripped to the waist and groping about, or, as they say, giddling for these fishes. Guddling for these fishes. The largest we got might have been a quarter of a pound, but they were of good flesh and flavor, and when broiled upon the coals lacked only a little salt to be delicious. In any by time Allan must teach me to use my sword, for my ignorance had much distressed him. Okay, this is bothering me a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm looking at this how it's written. In any by time Allan must teach me to use my sword, for my ignorance had much distressed him! Exclamation mark. And then, and I think besides, why do you write, how would write that way? Is that even proper? I mean, he ends the sentence with distressed him, and then exclamation point, and I think. That's just, that's a weird way of writing it. I'm wondering if that's proper or if it's a typo. And I think besides, as I had sometimes the upper hand of him in the fishing, he was not sorry to turn to an exercise where he had so much the upper hand of me. He made it somewhat more of a pain than need have been, for he stormed at me all through the lessons in a very violent manner of scolding, and would push me so close that I made sure he must run me through the body. I was often tempted to turn tail, but held my ground for all that, and got some profit of my lessons, if it was but to stand on guard with an assured countenance, which is often all that is required. So though it could I could yeah. So pardon me there, scholars. So, though I could never in the least please my master, I was not altogether displeased with myself. In the meantime, you are not to suppose that we neglected our chief business, which was to get away. It will be a, it would be, yeah, it will be many a long day, Alan said to me on our first morning, before the redcoats think about seeking Cory Nankere. So now we must get word sent to James. I'm losing that accent. And he must find the siller for us. But how shall we find? But how shall we send that word? Says I. We are here in a desert place, which yet we dare not leave, and unless ye get the fowls of the air to be your messengers, I see not what we shall be able to do. Aye, said Allan, you're a man of small contrivance, David. You're a man of small contrivance, David. Thereupon he fell in a muse, looking in the embers of the fire, and presently getting a piece of wood, he fashioned it in a cross, the four ends of which he blackened on the coals. Then he looked at me a little shyly. Could ye lend me my button? Says he. It seems a strange thing to ask a gift again, but I own I am loath to cut another. I gave him the button, whereupon he strung it on a strip of his greatcoat, which he had used to bind the cross, and tying in a little sprig of birch and another of fir, he looked upon his work with satisfaction. Now, said he, there is a little Calcan, what is called a hamlet in the English, not very far from Corinnaque, and it has the name of Col. These Scottish names are going to kill me. And it has the name of Colisnacon. There are living many friends of mine whom I could trust with my life, and some that I am no just so sure of. You see, David, there will be money set upon our heads. James himself is to set money on them, and as for the Campbells, they would never spare Celia where there was a Stuart to be hunt. If it was otherwise, I would go down to Coles-Nacon with whatever and trust my life into these people's hands as lightly as I would trust another with my glove. But being so, said I, being so, said he, I would as lief they dinna see me. There's bad folk everywhere, and what's far worse, weak ones. So when it comes dark again, I'll steal down into that carcan, and set this that I have been making in the window of a good friend of mine, John Breck McCor, a boorman of Appins. Okay, there's a little note here. A boorman is a tenant who takes stock from the landlord and shares with him the increase. Huh, interesting. With all my heart, says I, and if he finds it, what is he to think? Well, says Allan, I wish he was a man of more penetration, for by my troth I am afraid he will make little enough of it. But this is what I have in my mind. This cross is something in the nature of the cross tare, or fiery cross, which is the signal of a gathering on a clans. Yet he will know well enough the clan is not to rise, for there it is standing in his window, and no word with it. So he will say to himself, the clan is not to rise, but there is something. Then he will see my button, and that was Duncan Stewart's. And then he will say to himself, the son of Duncan is in the heather, and has need of me. Well, said I, it may be, but even supposing so there is a good deal of heather between here and the Forth. And that is a very true word, says Allan. But then John Breck will see the sprig of birch and the sprig of pine, and he will say to himself, for if he is a man of any penetration at all, which I misdoubt, Alan will be lying in a wood which is both of pine and birches, and then he will think to himself, that is not so very rife hereabouts, and then he will come and give us a look up in Korinaki, and if he does not, David, the devil may fly away with him for what I care, for he will no be worth the salt into his porridge. Eh, man, said I, drolling with him a little, you're very ingenious, but would it not be simpler for you to write him a few words in black and white? And that is an excellent observe, Mr. Barrowford of Shoals, says Alan, drolling with me, and it would certainly be much simpler for me to write to him, but it would be a sore job for John Breck to read it. He will have to go to the school for 2-3 years, and it's possible we might be wearied waiting for him. so, so basically, you can't read. Oh dear. That would make things difficult if you have an individual you're looking for help and they, of course, can't read. Sadly. So that night Alan carried down his fiery cross and set it in the bowman's window. He was troubled when he came back, for the dogs had barked, and the folk run out from their houses and come to one of the doors. On all accounts we lay the oh, I skipped a line, sorry. For the dogs had barked, and the folk run out from their houses, and he thought he had heard a clatter of arms and seen a redcoat in the borders of the wood. Sorry, and seen a redcoat come to one of the doors. On all accounts we lay the next day in the border of the wood, and kept a close lookout, so that if it was John Breck that came, we might be ready to guide him, and if it was the redcoats, we should have time to get away. About noon, a man was to be spied, straggling up the open side of the mountain in the sun, and looking round him as he came from under his hand. No sooner had Alan seen him than he whistled. The man turned and came a little towards us. Then Alan would give another peep, and the man would come still nearer. And so by the sound of whistling he was guided to the spot where we lay. Excuse me. He was a ragged, wild-bearded man, about 40, grossly disfigured with the smallpox, and looked both dull and savage. Although his English was very bad and broken, yet Alan, according to his very handsome use, whenever I was by, would suffer him to speak no Gaelic. Perhaps the strange language made him appear more backward than he really was. But I thought he had little good will to serve us, and what he had was the child of terror. Alan would have had him carry a message to James, but the bowman would hear of no message. "She will forget it," he said in his screaming voice, and would either have a letter or wash his hands of us. I thought Alan would be gravelled at that, for we lacked the means of writing in that desert. But he was a man of more resources than I knew. Searched the wood until he found the quill of a cush-hat dove, which he shaped into a pen, made himself a kind of ink with gunpowder from his horn and water from the running stream, and tearing a corner from his French military commission, which he carried in his pocket like a talisman to keep him from the gallows, he sat down and wrote as follows: "Dear kinsman, please send the money by the bearer to the place he kins of. Your affectionate cousin, A.S." This he entrusted to the bowman, who promised to make what manner of speed he best could, and carried it off with him down the hill. I'm not sure if I would fully trust him or not. That is a question. He was 3 full days gone, but about 5 in the evening of the third we heard a whistling in the wood, which Alan answered. And presently the bowman came up the waterside, looking for us, right and left. He seemed less sulky than before, and indeed he was no doubt well pleased to have got to the end of such a dangerous commission. He gave us the news of the country, that was alive with redcoats, that arms were being found and poor folk brought in trouble daily, and that James and some of his servants were already clapped in prison at Fort William, under strong suspicion of complacency. It seemed it was noised on all sides that Alan Breck had fired the shot, and there was a bill issued for both him and me with £100 reward. That is a lot of money, especially out there. This was all as bad as could be, and the little note the bowman had carried us from Mrs. Stewart was of a miserable sadness. In it she besought Alan not to let himself be captured, assuring him if he fell in the hands of the troops both he and James were no better than dead men. The money she had sent was all that she could beg or borrow, and she prayed heaven we could be doing with it. Lastly, she said she enclosed us one of the bills in which we were described. This we looked upon with great curiosity, and not a little fear, partly as a man may look in a mirror, partly as he might look into the barrel of an enemy's gun to judge if it be truly aimed. Allen was advertised as a small pock-marked, active man of 35 or thereby, dressed in a feathered hat, a French side coat of blue with silver buttons, and a lace a great deal tarnished, a red waistcoat, and breeches of black shag. And I as a tall strong lad of about 18, wearing an old blue coat, very ragged, an old Highland bonnet, a long homespun waistcoat, blue breeches, his legs bare, low country shoes, wanting the toes, speaks like a lowlander, and has no beard. Allan was well enough pleased to see his finery so fully remembered, and set down. Only when he came to the word tarnish, he looked upon his face like one a bit. He looked upon his face like one a little mortified. As for myself, I thought I cut a miserable figure in the bill, and yet was well enough pleased too, for since I had changed these rags, the description had ceased to be a danger and become a source of safety. Oh, of course, we have a radio voice redeemed from Dr. Zadium. Just hydrate a little. Get myself prepared. Hello there, all you wonderful, wonderful scholars, and welcome once again back to Radio Matsu, where we entertain you all night long. Tonight, we're reading Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped. So sit back, relax, and enjoy your time here at Radio Matsu for all you marvelous scholars. Oh, my goodness, I hope that voice was okay for you, Dr. Zadium. Excuse me. Alan, said I, you should change your clothes. Not true, said Alan. I have nae others. A fine sight I would be if I went back to France in a bonnet. Union 20, love it. Oh, thank you. Dr. Zadium, yes, thank you. Well, you are very welcome, Dr. Zadium. This put a second reflection in my mind, that if I were to separate from Alan and his telltale clothes, I should be safe against arrest, and might go openly about my business. Nor was this all, for suppose I was arrested when I was alone, there was little against me, but suppose I was taken in company with the reputed murderer, my case would begin to be grave. For generosity's sake I dare not speak my mind upon this head, but I thought of it none the less. I thought of it all the more too when the bowman brought out a green purse with 4 guineas in gold, and the best part of another in small change. True, it was more than I had, but then Allen with less than 5 guineas had to get as far as France. I with my less than two not beyond Queensferry, so that taking things into this proportion, Allen's society was not only a peril to my life, but a burden on my purse. Again, the book wants us to like David, but there is just something about him that's a little bit unpleasant. I mean, he supposedly is Alan's friend in this, but I always get the feeling that really he just looks down upon Alan the entire time, which is it's kind of disconcerting for a protagonist. I mean, he's thinking right now about abandoning Alan simply because, again, yes, it is true, it would be safer for him, but he's not really questioning the fact that, hey, maybe I should abandon the guy who's more or less saved my life a few times and who's been by my side all this time and is helping me out to go across a land I don't recognize. Yes, I've gotten in trouble because of him, but he's done more good than bad, and yet I'm thinking of abandoning him because, again, yes, it might be safer, but it's still kind of a jerk thing to do. It's not a very nice thing to do. You literally not nice. Yes, it's not nice. And I don't know why the book thinks we have to keep rooting for David the way he acts. It just it seems really odd, to be honest. But there was no thought of the sort in the honest head of my companion. He believed he was serving, helping, and protecting me. And what could I do but hold my peace and chafe and take my chance of it? Again, that line. He's not even appreciating what Alan's doing. He's just kind of like, well, I need to put up with Alan because he thinks that he's helping me, so I'll just put up with it. And I really don't like this, but I'll go along with it. It really, David is a really unpleasant protagonist. It's little enough, said Alan, putting the purse in his pocket, but it'll do my business. And now, John Breck, if ye will hand me over my button, this gentleman and me will be for taking the road. But the bowman, after feeling about in a hairy purse that hung in front of him in the Highland manner, though he wore otherwise the Lowland habit with sea trousers, began to roll his eyes strangely, and at last said, her mainsail will lose it, meaning he thought he had lost it. What? Cried Allan. You will lose my button. That was my father's before me. Now I will tell you what is in my mind, John Breck. It is in my mind that this is the worst day's work that ever ye did since ye were born. And as Allan spoke, he set his hands on his knees and looked at the bowman with a smiling mouth, and that dancing light in his eyes which meant mischief to his enemies. Perhaps the bowman was honest enough. Perhaps he had meant to cheat, and then, finding himself alone with two of us in a desert place, cast back to honesty as being safer. At least, and all at once, he seemed to find that button, and handed it to Allan. Well, it is a good thing for the honour of the Macols, said Allan, and then to me, here is my button back again, and I thank ye for parting with it, for it is which is of a piece with all your friendship to me. Then he took the warmest parting of the bowmen. For, says he, ye have done very well by me, and set your neck at a venture, and I will always give you the name of a good man. Lastly, the bowman took himself off by one way, and Allan and I, getting our chattels together, struck into another to resume our flight. Yeah, remember how I said in the last chapter that it seemed like David hadn't screwed anything up? Yeah, this chapter, yeah, once again, David, as I said before, kind of goes back to his very unpleasant personality. I mean, Alan gave him the button, which was his father's and his father's before him, in trust as a sign of their friendship. And all the while, we get to see inside David's head, and David seems to hold the friendship far less than Alan does. And again, I don't know what Robert Louis Stevenson was trying to do with this. Part of me feels that we are supposed to feel for David and cast the Highlanders as being, again, very rough, very backwards, very childlike, and that we're supposed to look at David's predicament and be like, oh, David, you should be out of this situation long before and leave Alan and get on with it. But maybe it's just me, but I'm a little more sympathetic to Alan than I am to David. Especially way back when in the second chapter, David got himself into this whole mess just by trusting the wrong people, just by being so sure of his moral I need trying to think of the word his moral statitude or his moral stature before everyone else that he looks over everyone else's flaws and it always gets him in the wrong place. And again, this previous chapter, I know maybe we should talk about the other stuff, but really this chapter for me boils down that one line of David. We're reminded that David looks down on Alan and sees Alan as a bit of a ball and chain to him rather than as a companion. Alan is there in his mind to be in the way of what he wants to get done. And if he could, as he was thinking, he would abandon Alan, abandon this whole venture just so he could get back home, which is understandable. But again, the man saved his life multiple times. And it just feels like David is completely ignoring that fact. Ugh. I'll say this, he's no Jim Hawkins from Treasure Island. Jim made mistakes too, but at least Jim admits to making the mistakes. Whereas David just doesn't. Okay, let's continue. Chapter 22, The Moor. Some 7 hours incessant, hard traveling brought us early in the morning to the end of a range of mountains. In front of us there lay a piece of low, broken desert land, which we must now cross. The sun was not long up, and shone straight in our eyes. A little thin mist went up from the face of the moorland, like a smoke. So that, as Allan said, there might have been 20 squadrons of dragoons there, and we none the wiser. We sat down, therefore, in a howe of the hillside, till the mist should have risen, and made ourselves a dish of drumming, and held a council of war. David, said Allan, this is the kittle bit. Shall we lie here till it comes night, or shall we risk it and stave on ahead? Well, said I am tired indeed, but I could walk as far again, if that was all. Aye, but it is nae, said Allan, nor yet the half. This is how we stand. Uppin's fair death to us. To the south it's all Campbells, and no to be thought of. To the north, where there is no muckle to be gained by going north, neither for you that wants to get to Queensferry, nor yet for me that wants to get to France. Well then, we can strike east. East be it, says I quite cheerily, but I was thinking into myself, oh man, if you would only take one point of the compass and let me take any other, it would be the best for both of us. Well, then east, you see, we have Meuse, said Allan. Once there, David, it's mere pitch and toss. Out on you, out on yon yeah, out on yon bold, naked, flat place. Where can a body turn to? Where can a body turn to? Let the redcoats come over a hill, they can spy you miles away, and the sorrows in their horses' heels that would soon ride you down. It's no good place, David, and I'm free to say it's worse by daylight than by dark. Yeah, moors. For those who do not know, moors are flat land, sometimes somewhat marshy, somewhat watery. Um, there's a there's quite a bit of them in Great Britain, including in Scotland, which is well known for its moors. Allan, said I, hear my way of it. Appin's death for us. We have none too much money, nor yet meal. The longer they seek, the nearer they may guess where we are. It's all a risk, and I give my word to go ahead until we drop. Allan was delighted. There are wills, said he, when ye are altogether too canny and wiggish to be company for a gentleman like me. But there comes other whiles when ye show yourself a metal spark, and it's then, David, that I love ye like a brother. The mist rose and died away, and showed us that country lying as waste as the sea, only the moorfowl and the peewees crying upon it, and far over to the east a herd of deer moving like dots. Much of it was red with heather, much of the rest broken up like with bogs and hags and peaty pools. Some had been burnt black in a heath fire, and in, and, and in another place there was quite a forest of dead firs, standing like skeletons. A wearier looking desert man never saw, but at last it was clear of troops, which was our point. We went down accordingly into the waste, and began to make our toilsome and devious travels toward the eastern verge. There were the tops of mountains all round, you are to remember, from whence we might be spied at any moment, so it behooved us to keep in the hollow parts of the moor, and when these turned aside from our direction to move upon its naked face with infinite care. Sometimes, for half an hour together, we must crawl from one heather bush to another, as hunters do when they are hard upon the deer. It was a clear day again, with a blazing sun. The water in the brandy bottle was soon gone, and altogether, if I had guessed what it would be to crawl half the time upon my belly, and to walk much of the rest stooping nearly to the knees, I should certainly have held back from such a killing enterprise. Toiling and resting, and toiling again, we wore away the morning, and about noon lay down in a thick bush of heather to sleep. Allan took the first watch, and it seemed to me I had scarce closed my eyes before I was shaken up to take the second. We had no clock to go by, and Allan stuck a sprig of in heth in the ground to serve instead, so that as soon as the shadow of the bush should fall so far to the east, I might know to rouse him. But I was by this time so weary that I could have slept 12 hours at a stretch. I had the taste of sleep in my throat. My joints slept even when my mind was waking. The hot smell of heather and the drone of the wild bees was like possets to me, and every now and again I would give a jump and find I had been dozing. The last time I woke I seemed to come back from farther away, and thought the sun had taken a great start in the heavens. I looked at the sprig of heath, and at that I could have cried aloud, for I saw I had betrayed my trust. My head was nearly turned with fear and shame at what I saw when I looked out around me on the moor. My heart was like dying in my body. For sure enough, a body of horse soldiers had come down during my sleep, and was drawing near to us from the southeast, spread out in the shape of a fan, and riding their horses to and fro in the deep part of the heather. Well, David just screwed up again. Excuse me. When I waked Alan, he glanced first at the soldiers, then at the mark in the position of the sun, and knitted his brows with a sudden quick look, both ugly and anxious, which was all the reproach I had of him. "What are we to do now?" I asked. "We'll have to play at being hares," said he. "Do you see yon mountain?" pointing to one on the northeastern sky. "Aye," said I. "Well then," says he, "let us strike for that. Its name is Ben Alder. It is a wild desert mountain full of hills and hollows, and if we can win to it before the morn, we may do yet." "But, Allen," cried I, "that will take us across the very coming of the soldiers." "I ken not that fine," said he, "but if we are driven back on Appin, we are two dead men. So now, David man, be brisk." With that he began to run forward on his hands and knees with an incredible quickness, as though it were his natural way of going. All the time, too, we kept winding in and out in the lower parts of the moorland, where we were the best concealed. Some of these had been burned or at least scathed with fire, and there rose in our faces, which were close to the ground, a blinding, choking dust as fine as smoke. The water was long out, and this posture of running on the hands and knees brings an overmastering weakness and weariness, so that the joints ache and the wrists faint under your weight. Now and then, indeed, where was a ah, Now and then, indeed, where was a big bush of heather, we lay awhile and panted, and putting aside the leaves, looked back at the dragoons. They had not spied us, for they held straight on, a half troop, I think, covering about 2 miles of ground, and beating it mighty thoroughly as they went. I had awakened just in time a little later. I had awakened just in time. A little later, and we must have fled in front of them, instead of escaping on one side. Even as it was, the least misfortune might betray us, and now and again, when a grouse rose out of the heather with a clap of wings, we lay as still as the dead, and were afraid to breathe. The aching and faintness of my body, the laboring of my heart, the soreness of my hands, and the smarting of my throat and eyes in the continual smoke of dust and ashes, had soon grown to be so unbearable that I would gladly have given up. Nothing but the fear of Allen lent me enough of a false kind of courage to continue. As for myself, and you are to bear in mind that he was cumbered with a greatcoat, he had just turned crimson, but as time went on the redness began to be mingled with patches of white. His breath cried and whistled as it came, and his voice, when he whispered his observations in my ear during our halts, sounded like nothing human. Yet he seemed in no way dashed in spirits, nor did he at all abate in his activity, so that I was driven to marvel at the man's endurance. Let me get a quick sip, my dear scholars. Mm. At length, in the first gloaming of the night, we heard a trumpet sound, and looking back from among the heather, saw the troop beginning to collect. A little after, they had built a fire, and camped for the night, about the middle of the waste. At this I begged and besought that we might lie down and sleep. There shall be no sleep the night, said Allan. From now on these weary dragoons of yours will keep the crown of the Meerland, and none will get out of Appin but winged fowls. We got through in the nick of time, and shall we jeopard what we gained? Nay, nay. When the day comes, it shall find you and me in a fast place on Ben Alder. Allan, I said, it's not the want of will, it's the strength I want. If I could, I would, but as sure as I am alive, I cannot. Very well then, said Allan. I'll kill ye. I looked to see if he were jesting, but no, the little man was in dead earnest, and the sight of so much resolution shamed me. Lead away, said I. I'll follow. He gave me one look as much as to say, well done, David, and off he set again at his top speed. It grew cooler, and even a little darker, but not much, with the coming of the night. The sky was cloudless, and it was still early in July, and pretty far north. In the darkest part of that night, you would have needed pretty good eyes to read, but for all that I have often seen it darker in a winter midday. Heavy dew fell and drenched the moor like rain, and this refreshed me for a while. When we stopped to breathe, and I had time to see all about me, the clearness and sweetness of the night, the shapes of the hills like things asleep, and the fire dwindling away behind us like a bright spot in the midst of the moor, anger would come upon me in a clap that I must still drag myself in agony and eat the dust like a worm. By what I have read in books, I think few that have held a pen were ever really wearied, or they would write of it more strongly. I had no care of my life, neither past nor future, and I scarce remembered there was such a lad as David Balfour. I did not think of myself, but just of each fresh step, which I was sure would be my last, with despair, and of Allan, who was the cause of it, with hatred. Allan was in the right trade as a soldier. This is the officer's part to make men continue to do things, they know not wherefore. And when, if the choice was offered, they would lie down where they were and be killed. And I dare say I would have made a good enough private, for in these last hours it never occurred to me that I had any choice but just to obey, as long as I was able, and die obeying. Excuse me. Day began to come in. After years, I thought, and by that time we were past the greatest danger, and could walk upon our feet like men, instead of crawling like brutes. But dear heart, have mercy. What a pair we must have made, going double like old grandfathers, stumbling like babes, and as white as dead folk. Never a word passed between us. Each set his mouth and kept his eyes in front of him, and lifted up his foot and set it down again like people lifting weights at a country play. Village fair. All the while with the moorfowl crying peep in the heather, and the light coming slowly clearer in the east. I say Allan did as I did. Not that ever I looked at him, for I had had enough ado to keep my feet. But because it is plain he must have been as stupid with weariness as myself, and looked as little where we were going, or we should have not. Excuse me. Let me read that again. My dear scholar stumbled a little bit there. but because it is plain he must have been as stupid with weariness as myself, and looked as little where we were going, or we should not have walked into an ambush like blind men. Oh dear. It fell in this way. We were going down a heathery brae, Alan leading and I following a pace or two behind like a fiddler and his wife, when upon a sudden the heather gave a rustle. 3 or 4 ragged men leapt out, and the next moment we were lying on our backs, each with a dirk at his throat. I don't think I cared. The pain of this rough handling was quite swallowed up by the pains of which I was already full, and I was too glad to have stopped walking to mind about a dirk. I lay looking up in the face of the man that held me, and I mind his face was black with the sun and his eyes very light, but I was not afraid of him. I heard Alan and another whispering in the Gaelic, and what they said was all one to me. Then the dirks were put up, our weapons were taken away, and we were set to face, sitting in the heather. "They are Clooney's men," said Alan. "We couldn't have fallen better. We're just to bide here with these, which are his out sentries, till they can get word to the chief of my arrival." Now, Clooney Macpherson, the chief of the clan Vorick, had been one of the leaders of the great rebellion 6 years before. There was a price on his life, and I had supposed him long ago in France, with the rest of the heads of that desperate party. Even tired as I was, the surprise of what I heard half wakened me. "What?" I cried. "Is Clooney still here?" "Aye, is he so?" said Alan. "Still in his own still in his own country, and kept by his own clan. King George can do no more." I think I would have asked further, but Alan gave me the put off. "I am rather wearied," he said, "and I would like fine to get to sleep." And without more words, he rolled on his face in a deep heather bush, and seemed to sleep at once. There was no such thing possible for me. You have heard grasshoppers whirring in the grass in the summertime? Well, I had no sooner closed my eyes than my body, and above all my head, belly, and wrists, seemed to be filled with whirring grasshoppers, and I must open my eyes again at once, and tumble and toss and sit up and lie down and look at the sky which dazzled me, or at Clooney's wild and dirty sentries, peering out over the top of the brae and chattering to each other in the Gaelic. That was all the rest I had, until the messenger returned, when as it appeared that Clooney would be glad to receive us, we must get once more upon our feet and set forward. Alan was in excellent good spirits, much refreshed by his sleep, very hungry, and looking pleasantly forward to a dram and a dish of hot collops, of which it seems the messenger had brought him word. For my part, it made me sick to hear of eating. I had been dead heavy before, and now I felt a sort of dreadful lightness, which would not suffer me to walk. I drifted like a gossamer, the ground seemed to me like a cloud. The hills a featherweight, the air to have a current, like a running burn, which carried me to and fro. With all that, a sort of horror of despair sat on my mind, so that I could have wept at my own helplessness. I saw Alan knitting his brows at me, and supposed it was in anger, and that gave me a pain of light-headed fear, like what a child may have. I remember too that I was smiling, and could not stop smiling, hard as I tried, for I thought it was out of place at such for I thought it was out of place at such a time. But my good companion had nothing in his mind but kindness, and the next moment 2 of the gillies had me by the arms, and I began to be carried forward with great swiftness, or so it appeared to me, although I dare say it was slowly enough in truth, through a labyrinth of dreary glens and hollows, and into the heart of that dismal mountain of Ben Aldair. Now, normally I would try for 4 chapters, but I'm going to stop here for tonight. Um, for 2 reasons. One, as you can probably tell, I'm starting to seem a little weary myself, it seems. Oh my goodness. And two, I was counting the chapters, and I think we don't have that many left for this book. There's 30 chapters in all, so going 4 by 4, we should be done maybe within 2 more streams. 2 or 3 streams, I think. So we're pretty close. So I think this would be a good stopping off point. Union 20, you did a marvelous job. Thank you, thank you. Private Maverick, been lurking, still enjoy the story. Oh, thank you. And I apologize for any of my flubs. It's been a very weary day. Um, but yeah, again, as I mentioned before, summary for tonight's reading. David is still somewhat of a jerk, a judgmental jerk. That's the word I was looking for. He's very judgmental. Um, Alan, for all his mistakes, kind of like him. Uh, so far things seem to be getting exciting again. So have you been enjoying it, my dear scholars? Then it seems you have. Well, I'm glad of it. I'm answering myself. Oh my goodness. Oh, so then, rest of the week. Uh, I don't know what's going on this weekend. Maybe the Dracula collab. I will keep you informed if it is happening. Next week, if everything goes according to plan, and that is always the key word, my dear scholars, if everything goes according to plan. Um, Next week we'll be returning to Psychonauts on Tuesday and reading more of Kidnapped on Thursday. Julian20, I will miss Tuesday. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Julian20. But as you know, the VOD will be up on YouTube for you to enjoy if you miss it. So then, my dear scholars, let's see who we can raid tonight. Okay, let me double check. Opening performance. Oh, opening performance? Opening performance of what? Julian20, if I am not prying too much. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Dance, that sounds wonderful. Let's see. Who can we raid tonight? Who is reading? Let's see if there's anyone else reading right now. Think anyone else is reading right now. Let me see. Actually, let's go visit Jewelry Jelly, good friend of the study. She's playing Karyu no Tami ni Kane wa Naru, which I am probably just butchering offhand. So then, my dear scholars, I say unto you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Till we meet each other again at the study, take care, and I shall see you next time. Till then, farewell and bye bye.